The U.S. Supreme Court temporarily allowed the Trump administration to maintain an order placing restrictions on mail-in voting. The Center Square reporter Andrew Rice tells us the administration's order, issued back in March, it would direct the U.S. Department of Homeland Security to curate lists with the names of all citizens at least 18 years old in each state who are eligible to vote. Now, the order, it would require the U.S. Postal Service to check the list before sending out mail-in ballots. Justices wrote that the internal directive does not regulate the state's voter registration processes. They said, nor does it impinge on the state's authority to create and enforce a legal code for elections. A federal judge in Massachusetts issued an order on July 25th blocking the Trump administration from implementing the mail-in ballot restrictions nationwide. A group of 23 states and the District of Columbia sued to prevent the order from going into effect. The judge in the case allowed all 23 states to be exempt from the order, and the Solicitor General argued that the lists have yet to be implemented in any state, and the order should not be valid since there was no harm incurred by the involved parties. Now, lawyers for the states said that the administration could not move forward with an order this close to Election Day in the 2026 midterms, which come up in November. Justices Ketanji Brown Jackson, Elena Kagan, and Sonia Sotomayor, they opposed the High Court's decision to move forward with the mail-in ballot order. Now, the three liberal justices said the majority's decision does not address fundamental issues in the case that must be decided. Further legal challenges to the president's orders are expected over the coming weeks that would prevent it from being implemented. Now, from the U.S. Supreme Court tackling issues around elections, we now check in with what recently happened at the Arizona Supreme Court concerning school choice. Last week, the Arizona Supreme Court ruled that an initiative to regulate the state's school choice program appears to lack enough valid signatures to qualify for that November 3rd ballot. The initiative sought to implement a $150,000 family income cap. That's a $150,000 cap for Arizona's Empowerment Schools scholarship accounts. And that could have kicked over 20,000 students as well as those who provide those, and also more oversight over those ESAs. Now, in Arizona, ESAs allow families to send their children to an alternate school of their choice or to homeschool them with the same money that would have been spent by their school district. The Center Square contributor Zachary Schmidt reports the High Court sent the case back to the trial court to determine whether the petition had the required 255,949 signatures for the Protect Education Act. Now, joining us to provide more insight into what the state's High Court ruling really means, let's talk with Jenny Clark, a lead plaintiff in that case. Now, Jenny, what does this outcome mean for you and other parents?
Well, we are so delighted about this entire outcome. Huge thanks to the Goldwater Institute for leading the way to protect school choice here in Arizona. We had the National Education Association come into Arizona in January, dump $7 million into our local Arizona Education Association, and attempt to buy their way onto Arizona's ballot this November by stopping our school choice program here, our ESA program. So they went out, they spent a bunch of money, they hired 1,600 signature gatherers, and they turned in those signatures, and ultimately they did not have enough qualified signatures to get to the ballot. We had them gathering signatures, people who were convicted felons, people that had signed multiple times. So the National Education Association's attempt to roll back school choice in Arizona through this ballot initiative failed.
So what exactly would this initiative have done other than the caps and more oversight? Do you feel that it would have been used to go after, the schools that are providing these services to parents who are seeking them out?
Absolutely. So this was a super sneaky attempt by the unions to attempt to control the entire ESA program. So, on one hand, they called this, the Protect Education Act, which is laughable. They wanted to kick every single hardworking Arizona taxpayer who makes $150,000 a year gross, regardless of their family size, off of the empowerment scholarship. Never mind the fact that you can go to public school in Arizona and there's no income cap. Every family is eligible for public school. It's the same with our empowerment scholarship. All families in Arizona are eligible. So they wanted to roll that back, and they wanted to basically be able to make legal challenges to families utilizing this scholarship. They wanted the independent ability to be able to challenge families on various issues of how they use their scholarship, all sorts of other regulatory barriers that ultimately would have just scared families from using the program. And this was just their first attempt. They say they start small. They would have come after charter schools next, private schools next. So we are so glad that Arizona voters declined to sign, and this will not be on the November ballot.
Now, how substantial is this when it concerns the funds that are used for education, right? I mean,
Yeah,
a lot of the
absolutely.
teachers' unions pushing back against these, seeming to say that it's giving an unfair advantage by taking money away from public schools and allowing for these dollars to be used elsewhere. How important is it that that money does follow the kids?
Well, in Arizona, the money, interestingly, has always followed the child, because if your child switches between school districts, right, or if you move out of state, the school doesn't keep the money for a student they're not educating. No, the money's always followed them. With Arizona's Empowerment Scholarship, or ESA program, it actually saves taxpayers significantly. That's because Arizona's per student spending right now is just about $16,000 a year per kid. Our Empowerment Scholarship is only $7,500 a year per kid. So you can see there's a significant taxpayer savings every time a family chooses an ESA. Listen, we've got 103,000 and counting kids benefiting from an ESA in Arizona. We would be the largest school district in the state. So you can just see that parents just want more choices. We're all trying to do what's best for our kids. Sometimes that's a district school, a charter school, homeschool. In other situations, it's an ESA. So we can use those funds for private school or other approved educational expenses.
Now, Jenny, even though the legal case isn't over, you've got a spokesperson for the Protect Education Act saying in a statement that the ballot initiative would not qualify for the November ballot, recognizing that, acknowledging that. But they went on to say that, quote, this does not reflect what Arizona voters want. If it does not reflect, she said, the overwhelming support of educators, parents, and public school advocates across the state who volunteered their time and demanded a voice in reforming a program that they said abused taxpayer money and pulled funding from their neighborhood public schools. What's your reaction to that?
Well, the Arizona Education Association and their counterpart, Save Our Schools Arizona, they just love a spin. It's unfortunate, but sometimes you lose. And in their case, they've now lost twice. They attempted to roll back the ESA program in 2022. They failed to get enough signatures in 2022. They have also failed this year to get enough signatures, and the Protect Education Act is not going on the ballot. I would argue that the voters have spoken. They spoke by refusing to sign the so-called Protect Education Act and saying that they prefer to protect school choice in Arizona. So we have now won. This will not be on the ballot in November, and we stand ready to go on the offense and continue to grow and expand school choice in Arizona.
Now, on social media, the Arizona Senate Democrats, they released a statement calling the ruling a, quote, major blow to public education in Arizona. Their statement went on to say, quote, the courts may have kept this measure off the ballot, but they cannot stop the fight for accountability. Jenny, where does this go from here?
Well, I'm a former member of the Arizona State Board of Education, and I think it's laughable when legislators and other elected officials talk about accountability. Families whose kids aren't reading proficiently in the public school often have very little accountability when it comes to getting money for private tutoring or other things if they feel the public school system may have failed them. The ESA program puts money back in the hands of parents. We are going to continue to defend and protect school choice in Arizona. We are a model for the rest of the country. Now, 17 states have ESA programs, and we will continue to do the good work of putting parents first.
Well, Jenny Clark, a lead plaintiff in that case that ultimately got the Arizona Supreme Court to keep a measure off the November ballot about school choice. Greatly appreciate you taking the time here, and we'll keep up on what's happening with that ongoing case. We'll be right back with more here from the States.